we're coming out dangerous.
Rockets going off.
Sometimes the brightest stars shine for the shortest amount of time.
Yeah, oh yeah.
They heard us all across Tallahassee after that one.
We got to bring home the W.
Oh yeah, we're going to destroy them.
Put them on the Heisman watch.
They're fine, man.
Big Ben Player of the Year.
We're going to be a force to be reckoned with.
I played a little adult league goalie.
I felt like I scored in the World Cup, but I didn't even score.
Controversy? Question mark?
Pure chaos.
Go crazy was insane.
Chris Petley, he was the defensive MVP of the 2019 season.
Oh yeah, no, I'm in my prime right now. Let's go.
All right, and welcome aboard here. Hello to all the good people. Some fun times. We're trying something absolutely brand new. Your boys, Andrew, Joop, Trent, and Young, coming aboard with you here today. So for better or for worse, Trent, got to get into these conference realignments. But on a personal level, how we doing, my man?
Excellent, man. Weather's great over here in Jacksonville. Ready to get back out to the Tallahassee scene and see some games this fall. We might have to make a road trip or two. But yeah, I'm sure we'll be unpacking that soon. But yeah, just pumped that the conference finally got announced, man. We've been sitting on pins and needles waiting for it, and here we are.
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, getting into the mix here, and that's the big story of the day, right? Getting into the mix. We've been waiting so long. What are we going to do? Where are we going to be going? Because I think with all the variables in the mix here, this is the big story. So chip away, who are we going to be playing? And then we can kind of talk schedule and get into all of that as that kind of trickles down, my man. But, you know, as you look for it, we've been waiting for so long. So I think we just got to get into it, my man, as we get rolling here on the outset. Any setup you want to have with this as we get going?
Whatever, man. Let's just read them off. Whatever you want to do. I don't care.
All right, so here we go. We're going to try to get into we want to get into some of these actions here, Trent. So this is going to be huge for the people who have already seen it. I mean, you already know what we're going for, right? I think it's pretty clear based on what the league has shown us, what we can be expecting. So we'll try to unpack that a little bit and exactly what that means, because I think there's a little more beyond just the kind of surface level, Trent, of what we can actually get into, if that makes sense. Because you see the teams, you may seem, okay, you know, that's what we have going on. But being able to kind of contextualize that, I think, you know, that's what the purpose of this exercise is, right?
One would hope.
So I know we're uploading here as I try to stall through, but feel free to comment here, people. We're live, so why not try to play this out, see what we can get. If you think this is nonsense and think this is terrible, let us know. I'm interested to know. Of course, we might get some people elsewhere from the conference, so we'll see how that goes as well. But we're going to open source this a little bit, my man. But without further ado, I think we're ready to add this joker to the stage here, Trent. So let's unpack it. But bam, of course, courtesy of Tallahassee Soccer Club, you're beautifully graphicked up here, Gulf Coast. Well, I guess formerly known as the Gulf Coast Conference. Columbus, New Orleans, Pensacola, Tallahassee, Jacksonville, Miami, Naples, and then, of course, Global Pathways, which is also a Naples franchise as well, Trent. Instant reactions here to see in the mix. I'm sure if people are tuning into this or can see this, they're aware of what it means and they're aware of, you know, what kind of the breakdown is, right? I don't think that's breaking news for most people, but as you look at this, what are your kind of indications or what are your takeaways as we get rolling through here?
Yeah, Joop. So I'm just super pumped that Columbus was able to get into our conference. I know we talked about that on our last pod that you and I did together, and we were just hoping that geographically speaking, it just made the most sense for them to fit into whatever conference we ended up being in, just with the reasonably short travel distance between the two cities. We kind of figured, and we had heard some rumblings that we really weren't able to divulge yet, but we had kind of heard that, you know, we might get Naples, we might get one or two of the Miami teams. So we get one Miami team, then we get two Naples teams. We kind of, like I said, assumed that was going to happen, but we didn't know for sure. So it's kind of hard to give like a knee-jerk reaction because, you know, we kind of felt that one coming on. But It's still kind of crazy though to think that we're going to be driving all the way out to New Orleans and our league expands all the way that far westward, and then we're going to go all the way down the state of Florida into Miami and into Naples to play some games. So obviously, we don't know what the schedule is going to be like next, or what the schedule is going to be like. It hasn't been announced yet. So that's just kind of my inference. I would assume that we'll have to play at least one game down there, whether between Naples or Miami. I feel like one of those road trips is going to have to happen just with whatever schedule they come up with. But that'll be another pod for another day. But as of now, I'm just happy that there are 8 teams in the conference altogether. We lose the Roots, obviously. They weren't coming back, Southern States. So we had to fill the rest of the conference somehow. We get Columbus, which makes the most sense to me. And then it's kind of a reach, no pun intended, to go all the way down to Miami and to Naples. But hey, man, we got 8 teams. We got a conference. The Gulf Coast Sunshine Conference? Is that what it's called now?
Yeah, I think that's the official name. Is just, once again, the path of least resistance, what seems to be the nucleus and the ongoing precedent that the league that we're in likes to set. So, why not come up with a new name when you could just combine them into what they already are? So, yeah, I think it's the Gulf Coast Sunshine Conference, which is falling into the South region. So don't believe them, even though this has the feel of a Southeast Conference, right? And of course, for you football fans, geographically, it makes a lot of sense, giving the states that we have in play, from all the way out Louisiana, all the way into Florida. But the Southeastern Conference is that kind of Carolina conference that we talked about, Trent. Of course, for the real ones who were back in for episode 33 of the podcast, they understand kind of what that realm is. And so, selfish plug, go back and check out 33 if you don't know what we're talking about. So, of course, that's a lot of Carolina teams. I think they threw a Knoxville team and a couple other Tennessees in the mix. But yeah, this is the Gulf Coast Sunshine Conference in the South region, which, Trent, now the South region is complete. We've gotten all the teams here. And that's kind of another thing that's, I guess, somewhat of an elephant in the room is just like the West last year, there's only 3 conferences in this region. So when you talk about going forward into like a semifinal, that could shift some things up a little bit. It'll be interesting to watch going forward. But I'm curious, Trent. I think we have it here. How about a little conference name game? So we have the Gulf Coast Sunshine Conference, like we talked about. Any preferences with any of these other ones, or ones that maybe you thought of kind of along the miss that you prefer as opposed to what we have going forward here?
I love number 4. That's awesome. That sounds like that's something that you put together. Actually, I know you put together because you make all the graphics. But personally, I think Sun Coast kind of makes the most sense because all of these teams are, outside of Columbus, all of these teams are relatively just a short drive away from some body of water. So I think that would make the most sense. But at the end of the day, I could care less what it's called. As long as Tallahassee's in the conference playing games, I don't care, man. I think that was just my biggest worry this offseason is just are we really not going to be able to get a 6 to 8 team conference again, with losing all the teams that we lost. So just really pumped that we're able to get 8 back, man. And hopefully we can get a decent schedule out of it. Have some of those teams from down south come up and make the trip up to the Gene, where it's not as friendly as it may be down there in Naples or Miami. So we'll see. But yeah, I like the Sun Coast, and I think Gulf Shine just sounds funny. But yeah, I don't really have a preference. What about you, buddy?
Yeah, I like some kind of in the mix there. I like the Gulf Shine, putting us first, right? We brought more teams to the conference than the Sunshine did. And so I want to kind of power through. And then realistically, that covers most of the teams, except for obviously Columbus is kind of the odd man out in that situation. But, we're working with what we're working with. But interesting to see how the name developed there. Let's go through here some takeaways. So these are things to me that kind of stuck out that without them being said outright, this is what happened. So some alignment takeaways. What's your biggest thing here, Trent? Because these are some things that I just picked out. Maybe there's something else that was kind of lingering for you that was answered here with this conference announcement. Once again, the schedule's not out, just the teams that we're playing.
I think it's granted, I don't know what was up with the Sunshine Conference, if they had teams depart or what, if they had to merge. But I think it is kind of silly that, we're merging with Naples and Miami when there are teams in Orlando that we could have potentially played against. So I don't know if those teams got a conference that they are looking at, or if they've already agreed to be in one. But I think just geographically that would make a lot more sense, because then you're talking, like 3-4 hours from Tallahassee to Orlando.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that's a lot better than the 6-7 down to Naples and even beyond down to Miami. So, I mean, just that would make more sense. I am kind of surprised we didn't get another Georgia team like Valdosta FC, or even any of the Atlanta teams to not come down. But are any of those Atlanta teams in that Southeast Conference with the Carolinas that you were talking about?
Mm-mm. So that's what makes me think. I know the Revs were kind of going strong and they were making a real push for the UPSL. I didn't know if they would have the UPSL and the MPSL, but it looks like the UPSL league will be filling that void, because there's no other alignment where they could go. Because what I thought would ultimately potentially be a scenario is you would have the 4 Georgia teams together. So let's say by some chance Valdosta ended up being MPSL, because that's a club that's just been announced here locally that's kind of floating around, but it didn't really feel like MPSL was going to be on the table. But to me, if we got the Atlanta teams to come back, that was going to be a potential mini conference, right? And then we'd kind of get the Sunshine Gulf situation that we had. But I think based on this, we can logically infer, unless they're doing a 3-team conference, I think it's pretty clear that boom, 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 these 3 teams are not going to be involved in NPSL, which then leads you to know, hey, we've now down to a 3-conference South region over there with Lone Star, all the Texas teams, and then kind of that quote unquote Southeast Conference, which is Tennessee and Carolina strong right now. But so that's going to be something going forward here as we kind of go through. So here's our little Gulf Shine conference, right? And that's kind of poorly put together there with the words. That did not translate well. But yeah, they're not liking my format of my my PowerPoints here. But yeah, as far as that goes, that's what we're working with here. Just kind of focusing on that right side. You see the 3 teams coming in, the expansion team, and then the 4 Gulf Coast teams, kind of what we're rolling with. And then, of course, you look at Lone Star, from those teams kind of running into the mix, 8 teams coming back from there. And there's that kind of Southeastern Conference that we were talking about. That was kind of boiling through to us, those Carolinas. And then they also brought down Greenville this year as a new twist to the mix here. But Trent, as we circle around, I think now that we've established the teams, right, that's very clear. Everything else is kind of ironed out. There's not much details there. I think the next fold goes to it is, where do we go from here? I know some of the conferences have a potential split, like an East-West conference. When you think of the Texas, I think Texas is on an East-Western split. I think the Southeastern is also on an Eastern-Western split. Are you worried? Are you pro split conference here, or where do you kind of fall in that situation? Because I think that's definitely a realm of possibility given the geographical spread that we talked about between a lot of these teams.
Worried, yes, but I couldn't exactly tell you how, because it's like, where's Tallahassee going to end up in that? I mean, I feel like it would be the Western Conference if it were divided into an Eastern and Western division. Sorry, not conference. With Columbus, New Orleans, and Pensacola, that just seems like it makes the most sense. Obviously, Jacksonville's got the most money to travel, so that shouldn't be that big of an issue for them. And correct me if I'm wrong, didn't they play with Naples at one point in the same conference as them?
I'm pretty sure they were in that old Sunshine, which Naples was a part of. Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty confident in that. Yes.
So like they're already familiar with making that trip. That's not anything crazy to ask them to do. So I think that if we were to do it, then Tallahassee's just got to be in the West. But then at the same time, it's like we're still so close to Jacksonville. That's only, a few hours away. So that would really stink to not be able to have 2 games a year against Jacksonville, because I don't want to call it a rivalry, But, we've had some heated games in the Gene week 1 the last couple seasons, man. So, I want to embellish that, and I want to keep that going as much as we can, because obviously they're top dog on the block as of now. We'll see how this season shakes out. But with no Southern stars left after winning last year, Jacksonville's top dog on the block. So would just hate to not have to play or not be able to play them twice this season. But if it shakes out to where we're playing Columbus twice, New Orleans twice, Pensacola twice, and then, just play the other teams once each, then I'm fine with that, because I think that just makes more sense. It's really tough on a Saturday to make it all the way down to Naples or Miami, dude. Like, you're leaving Friday for sure. And these guys have jobs and families and kids and stuff, man. So it's just hard for some of them to be able to make a trip that long that takes up, 2-3 whole days on top of playing a game in between all that travel. So, yeah, I just think that would make the most sense. And now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know. I kind of talk myself out of being worried, and I'm kind of really hopeful that we split it up that way.
Right. I know the NPSL is really strong on that 10-game schedule, that 10-game slate, which to me, when you think about it, if you're trying to break it up, that would be the easiest way to get you to that number 10. So basically, like you said, I think a Western, Eastern / Northern, Southern split would be the most logical. You have those top 4 teams: Columbus, New Orleans, Pensacola, Tallahassee. That's your West, so to speak. Jacksonville, Miami, Naples, and then Global Pathways, Naples GP, which you can see down there at the bottom, would be your de facto East. So since there are 7 other opponents, you play everybody once, and then you play your division or sub-conference, depending how you term it, each twice. So we would play Columbus home and home, New Orleans home and home, Pensacola home and home. That would get us to the Magic 10. Obviously, you'd love to get a full 14, not only as far as schedule parity and balance and all that stuff, but as far as breaking it through. And if you try to kind of simplify that, that is probably the easiest way to go. And then it would be very easy to take the top 2 teams from each sub-conference, and that would make your 4 playoff teams, or the top teams from each side and then 2 wild cards or something like that. Because it gets a little dicey with an uneven schedule load, which we haven't had since, the GCPL days, right? So when you try to balance that out as far as points per match, I know are probably going to come into the mix, but, there could be a situation where, a lot of these teams aren't getting much kind of playing experience. And you're thinking about some of the, I'm trying to think of who would kind of be in play the most, but I guess it's really wild card depending how Columbus is. But it would be really interesting to see how the balance kind of falls out between these squads if you're trying to get to that 10-game conference. But, I think ultimately the 14 is potentially still on the table.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we've been really lucky since we've been in the NPSL to get a really solid schedule, even with losing a few teams the last couple of seasons each. So it's definitely still on the table to have those full 14 games. But just realistically speaking, with the travel and everything, I don't want to say I'm hopeful for the 10 games, but I just don't want to wish, because obviously I want as many games as possible, right? But I just don't want our boys traveling that far, and that's just tough, dude. Like to go down to the bottom tip of Florida 3 times in one season would just be brutal, because there's no way you're going to go down and I was thinking about this when you were talking. It's like maybe we could go down and play both Naples teams, and then maybe they can send them up here to play, Tallahassee and Jacksonville. But it's what are you going to do? Play 2 games in one weekend? You going to wait 3 days in between matches and just hang out in a hotel? So that seems pretty unreasonable as well. But I want as many games as possible, but I want it to be as relatively easy as possible for us to be able to make these appearances and be able to perform well, being well rested and not have any sort of van lag, if you will.
Right. And that's, you talk about it from us perspective. Yeah, I feel like we're right in the middle. Obviously, it's 6 hours to New Orleans, 6.5, 7.5, depending, what part of Miami. Because, you got a Miami team, but Miami's huge. And, some people claim, Fort Lauderdale is Miami, right? So what part of Miami we're actually dealing with. But, yeah, you're thinking of Naples to New Orleans, or Naples to Columbus is tough. Yeah, I get, hey, it's a national league, right? So I understand people who bring that up. You're going to have to travel if it's a national league. Yeah, but also they have conferences for a reason, and they're supposed to make this legitimate. Hey, by the way, these people are amateurs. They are not getting paid. We are not professional. Check the U.S. soccer pyramid. There's nobody that's getting major salary from this, too. So amateur league, don't forget that as well. So, yeah, I think for just as a travel concern, you think about that also with a condensed schedule. You know, if you go the full 14, you're going to have to get some midweek games. And even on a 10, even though we have enough weekends, the way these jokers like to reschedule the games, we're inevitably going to get some midweek games. So I know it's not as much of a factor for some, but, as far as selfishly thinking for Tallahassee, like, that's brutal. And also on New Orleans standpoint, they would have to have some kind of bunching with these teams if they were going to go down to kind of South Florida, which I think would ultimately, hey, we're going to hit the road for a week and we're going to do like a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and then we'll get back sometime Sunday or Monday, right? You would literally have to go a full 7 days if you wanted to try to run these guys.
Yeah, that'd be brutal. I mean, we talked about how tough it's been going out on the road, to Hattiesburg and to New Orleans and to Jacksonville, like within a week and a half. And it's like, I don't know. I'd kind of rather take that all day long over going down and playing 3 games over a week. What do you think?
Right. At least you wouldn't have to go there and back. Because the thing was, it was always there and back. If you do it consecutively, which I know isn't really on the table here for TSC, but for some of these other clubs, we're not as familiar with them, especially Columbus coming into the mix, which brings its own set of interesting narratives and clarifications we'll have to go over throughout the year, which I'm sure we can unpack in a later episode as part of the MPSL consortium. But then you also, think about those other teams. I'm very interested, though. It'll bring a nice spread and variety to the conference because obviously Naples has been, kind of tearing it up down there. So I want to see if they just kind of dominate Central South Florida just because there's nobody else to challenge them, or if they are, for real, Trent, to see kind of what they bring to the table. So I think in that regard, from a competitive standpoint, excited about the possibility. I'd rather go down to Naples as well as opposed to Hattiesburg. At least you can catch the beach, have a good time, as opposed to just sitting in the swamp and going back to the hotel over there out west, my man.
And that Raising Cane's. Don't forget about that Cane's. We tore that crap up.
Yeah, got to get them on sponsorship here going forward. But now we got it fixed up, right? So let's go through some of these conferences. We talked about the Golf Shine, the Shine Golf, the Gulf Coast, Sunshine, whatever we're calling it, the Scraps of the South,
That's a good one.
the Filthy Dirty South for those ludicrous fans out there, conference potentially on the table. That's kind of the breakdown, right? You see the addition of Columbus and then the merging of the other ones. So just want to kind of recap that now that we have these improved graphics and not that poorly cropped nonsense, what we have here in the rest of the region. So let's say we go through and TSC wins the conference. These are some teams you could potentially be running into late in the playoffs. So 3 conferences make up the South. And the big one I think you're going to be looking at is going to be this Lone Star Conference. You think about the last couple of years and the successes, the region largely been represented here by these groups of teams or teams in the Lone Star Conference trend. This is kind of the power base of the South, as it were.
Give me Joop. It's not showing the graphic on my screen.
Okay. I'm seeing it.
Okay. There it is. All right, cool. It just updated. It was something else. Rephrase the question. Forgive me.
Yeah, it's insane. This is the cool power base here that we have with Lone Star going on. These are your teams, your squads that are kind of been towing the rope here for the South region. When you think about the ones nationally that are successful and taking care of business.
I mean, I would argue that that's one of the strongest, if not the strongest conference in all of the MPSL. I mean, we hear about these guys every year, Denton, Diablos, getting like 5,000 fans out to their games and stuff, man. So like they've got a great fan base. They have really high attendance numbers. And they're just able to compete year in and year out. And that's a very powerful conference. You got 8 teams, like you said, split right in half so that travel is more feasible for everybody a part of the league. So I just hope that whoever's calling the shots for our conference is able to kind of take a page out of their book and set it up like that. So that way, we don't get into those situations where we're traveling down there for a whole week. But yeah, I mean, it would be tough to have to face any of these guys, if Tallahassee is able to win the conference and those are our next opponents. I mean, that's when it gets hairy, man. So, I mean, it's already going to be hairy getting through the conference. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to poo-poo that, but yeah, it's going to be tougher once we get out. So, but hey, man, we're up for the battle. They don't call us the Battle Lions for nothing.
There you go. Absolutely. And then we can kind of go forward just to clean up the rest of the region. This is what we'd be looking at. So it's the Southeastern Conference, which is actually north of us. You have those Carolina teams in Appalachian, Charlottetown, Apotheos, Hickory, Port City, Greenville going to come down from that Mid-Atlantic Conference this year. And then you see those 3 expansion teams kind of bring it up through here in the mix as well.
Yeah, it's doing the same thing where it's not updating the graphic.
So those are kind of your other ones. You got Bristol. Yeah, like we talked about, Trent. I'll just kind of read them off for you. Bristol, the new expansion team. Hickory, the new expansion team. Port City, the new expansion team up in the Carolinas. And, those are the 3 new ones that we have. You have Greenville coming down from that Mid-Atlantic Conference. And then, some of those other ones, Appalachian, Charlottetown, 865, that Knoxville team. And then, of course, the runners-up last year, Apotheos, coming out of the East. So these are the other teams that we could potentially see coming up here later on. So as we kind of circle back here, Trent, to our old reliable kind of conference output in the mix here, the old Gulf Shine, whatever we're calling it here. I think we're pretty much kind of close and open the book here. Anything we needed to kind of touch on before we kind of ride out with this situation that we have?
Yeah, just one last prevailing thought that I didn't mention yet. I'm just happy that there's a breath of fresh air coming into the league. And, we get to see some old faces for sure, but, just happy to have some new competition and be able to gauge ourselves against some other opponents. We know how we hold up against Southern states. We were able to finally catch up to them last year. We had a very gritty playoff game. But we have no idea what Naples is made of. Like you're saying, are they running shop down there just because they're the only ones in town? Now they're going to have to play Jacksonville again. We'll see how that goes. They got to play us. They got to play New Orleans. So I'm just excited to see how the season shakes out. Happy to see that we have a conference finally. It's been very belabored up until now, but we got it. And now we're just sitting and waiting on the schedule. So that's pretty much all I have today, Joop. What about you, buddy?
Absolutely. Yeah, rock and roll. It's pretty much what we have. No, they need to kind of hammer down. I'm sure we'll unpack it here later episodes. But for episode 35 here, Tally SC Talk, thanks for rolling with us, bearing with some technical difficulties here for the live stream, but I wanted to try it out here while we had the opportunity. So for Trenton Young and Andrew Joop, have a great rest of your day, and thank you for tuning in. Go TSC.
We're coming out dangerous.
Rockets going off.
Sometimes the brightest stars shine for the shortest amount of time.
Yeah, oh yeah.
They heard us all across Tallahassee after that one.
We got to bring home the W.
Oh, yeah. We're going to destroy them.
Put them on the Heisman watch. They're fine, man.
Big Ben Player of the Year.
We're going to be a force to be reckoned with.
I played a little adult league goalie.
I felt like I scored in the World Cup, but I didn't even score.
Controversy? Question mark?
Pure chaos.
To go crazy was insane.
Chris Petley, he was the defensive MVP of the 2019 season.
Oh yeah, no, I'm in my prime right now. Let's go.